In Magic the Gathering, fight is a keyword effect. When one creature fights another, that means those two creatures do damage to each other equal to their power. Basically, it's like those two creatures are in combat together without actually being in combat together. Arena, a promo card from 1994, was the first card to ever have this effect, but it wasn't used a whole lot for the first 17 plus years of Magic's existence. However, that changed with the release of Innistrad in 2011 when the effect was keyworded, and ever since then, we've seen this effect used pretty regularly. It primarily shows up in green as a removal effect, but it's also commonly found in red. While fighting is itself quite good in decks with big creatures, it gets even better when a creature comes with a fight effect. This is because, obviously enough, you need a creature in play for a fight effect to work, so putting that type of effect on a creature solves that shortcoming since it can do the fighting itself. Fight effects do have some other limitations as far as removal effects go, since your creature needs to be the same size or ideally bigger than the creature it fights with, and things just don't always line up that way. Still, green decks tend to have big creatures, so they can use this type of effect pretty effectively. As with any creature that has an ability that lets them remove something, creatures that can fight tend to be quite strong, and that's exactly the kind of creature we're looking at in this video, creatures that come with fight effects. To be eligible for this list, a creature had to have an ability that allows it and or another creature to fight another creature. In all, there were 56 cards eligible, and in this video we'll look at the 10 fighting creatures who have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you want Magic singles or sealed product, use my link in the description. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours. And a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like Regional Championships. At number 10, it's Daybreak Ranger. As an Innistrad card, it's one of the first cards to ever feature the word fight in the text box. For 2 generic and a green, it's a 2/2, and you can tap it to do 2 damage to target creature with flying. Obviously enough, it does not say fight anywhere on this card, but it's a werewolf, so you know it can transform. It checks to see if no spells were cast on the previous turn during each upkeep, and if there weren't any, it turns into Nightfall Predator, a 4/4 with an activated ability that costs 1 red mana, and you tap the Predator, and then it fights target creature. During your upkeep, it checks to see if 2 or more spells were cast by a single player last turn, and if they were, it turns back into Daybreak Ranger. Basically, the front side is pretty good at hating on flyers, while the Nightfall Predator side is more generally good, as a 4/4 that can fight for only a single mana is very strong, and capable of killing a whole lot of creatures while surviving itself. It gained all of its points in standard red-green aggro decks that ran a singleton copy to be searched up by Green Sun Zenith and or Birthing Pod. The human side was particularly useful against Insectile Aberration, the transformed Delver of Secrets, which was pretty dominant in that format. However, it hasn't gained any points since rotating out of standard, and it's likely to lose its spot on this list in the long run. At number 9, it's Ulvenwald Tracker, another creature from original Innistrad block that loves to fight, or at least it loves to watch fights. It's 1 green mana for a 1/1, and you can pay 1 generic and a green and tap it to have target creature you control fight another target creature. While he can target himself, his 1/1 body isn't exactly going to be scaring anyone, so as it shows in the art, the Tracker usually lets some bigger creatures do the fighting for him. Like Daybreak Ranger, it was played in standard toolbox decks that could grab the Tracker when it was at its best, but it also saw play in more straightforward aggro decks, especially those with some great creatures for fighting, including regenerating creatures like Lotleth Troll and indestructible creatures like Predator Ooze. Both of those could also grow quite easily, making them even better at fighting. Fighting with those repeatedly was pretty nasty. Some of these decks also used Wolfear Silverheart, whose Soulbound effect could even make the Tracker into a formidable fighter itself. It's also been played some in Modern, where it's mostly been a sideboard card that can be brought in against opponents against whom repeatable removal is really good, and it also used to be played in Legacy Maverick decks. This was another deck that used Green Sun Zenith to grab the Tracker when the situation was right. However, the Tracker doesn't have any top 8 since 2017. At number 8, it's Vorinclex. For 3 generic and 2 green, it's a 6/6 with trample and reach, and when it enters, you search up 2 forests and put them into your hand. In other words, you get an above rate creature that draws you 2 cards, and it can even help fix your mana if you have non-basics with the forest type. As with Daybreak Ranger, there's not anything about fighting on the front of this card. You have to transform it to get there, and you can do that by paying 6 generic and 2 green. That's a lot of mana to be sure, but because Vorinclex grabs you 2 forest, it's pretty doable. Once it does transform, it becomes a saga called the Grand Evolution. Chapter 1 mills 10 cards, and you can put 2 creatures from among those onto the battlefield. Chapter 2 distributes 7 +1/+1 counters among your creatures. And Chapter 3 is where the fighting comes in, because it makes it so all of your creatures, including the 2 you probably cheated into play and put a bunch of counters on, can fight another target creature for 1 generic mana until end of turn. Then it turns back into Vorinclex. When I was first making this list, I was thinking I'd exclude Vorinclex since it's not a creature when the fight stuff happens, but it does have to start out as a creature to ever get there, and in the end I decided that was enough. And yeah, this card is incredibly strong thanks to both sides, and the Grand Evolution's Chapter 3 is very likely to end the game on the spot if the first 2 chapters didn't do it for you, since your huge creatures will get any blockers out of the way and slam in for a ton of damage. While in Standard, Vorinclex's top 8s came almost exclusively in 4-color Legends decks. As you can guess from the name, this was a deck that could get extra value out of Legends like Vorinclex, as well as a deck that played a ton of colors and needed good fixing. Vorinclex could grab the deck's tri-lands, like Zeatora's Proving Ground and Jetmir's Garden, while also representing a very real threat in its own right. Vorinclex has also put up some top 8s in Pioneer Devotion to Green, decks which are great at generating mana with Nykthos, so transforming him was very much on the table. However, it's not featured in current versions of Pioneer Devotion to Green, and it doesn't have any top 8s since early this year. At number 7, it's Kogla, the Titan Ape. For 3 generic and 3 green, he's a 7/6 that fights a creature you don't control when he enters the battlefield. He destroys an artifact or enchantment when he attacks, and you can pay 1 generic and a green and return a human to your hand to make him indestructible until end of turn. His absolutely massive size allows him to manhandle almost anything when he enters, and he comes with a ton of additional upside. If you have mana untapped and a human in play, your opponent has very few avenues with which to deal with Kogla, and he can even start destroying even more permanents once he starts to attack. While in Standard, he was played in the top curve in mono-green aggro decks, and he's also seen a bit of play in Pioneer Devotion to Green, where he's not only a good thing to ramp into with Nykthos, he also contributes 3 devotion. However, he's another inactive card on the list as he hasn't put up any top 8 since 2024, and he's only got 3 points since the end of 2022. At number 6, it's Tovolar's Huntmaster. For 4 generic and 2 green, it's a 6/6 that makes 2 2/2 wolf tokens when it enters the battlefield. This is yet another fighting creature who doesn't actually fight on the front side. It's from Innistrad Midnight Hunt, so it transforms a little bit differently than its predecessors. It uses Daybound and Nightbound. While the condition for the transformation is pretty similar, it becomes night if a player casts no spells during their own turn, and it becomes day if a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn. But the big difference is that once a card with Daybound is played, it's tracked for the rest of the game, regardless of if there's a werewolf around. And then when it becomes night, or if it is night when you cast this card, it's Tovolar's Pack Leader, a 7/7 that makes those 2 tokens when it enters and when it attacks. And you can also pay 2 generic and 2 green to have another wolf or werewolf you control fight target creature you don't control. So yeah, this is a big creature that can make a whole lot of wolves and fight with those wolves quite effectively. While the Huntmaster saw some play in mono-green aggro decks in Standard, most of its success in both Standard and Pioneer came in Winota decks. Winota triggers anytime a non-human you control attacks and lets you look at the top 6 cards of your library and put a human from among those cards into play tapped and attacking and indestructible until end of turn. You can see how the Huntmaster slots perfectly into that deck. It's a great hit off of the trigger because it's huge and gives you multiple bodies, but the very fact it brings non-humans along, in this case wolves, helps you trigger Winota on future turns too. Winota decks were so good that she got banned out of Pioneer, and since rotating out of Standard, the Huntmaster doesn't really have a home anywhere. At number 5, it's Polukranos Unchained. For 2 generic, a green and a black, it's a 0/0 that enters with 6 +1/+1 counters on it. If damage would be dealt to Polukranos while it has a +1/+1 counter, you prevent that damage and remove that many +1/+1 counters from it instead. You can also pay 1 generic, a black, and a green to have Polukranos fight another target creature, and he can also escape from the graveyard. That means, in this case, if you pay 4 generic, a black, and a green, and exile 6 other cards in your graveyard, he comes back to the battlefield, and he happens to do it with 12 +1/+1 counters. Having a huge creature that can fight is pretty nice, but Polukranos' damage prevention ability and recursion has the potential to make him even better. He might shrink when he fights stuff, but he can do it efficiently enough that that's fine, especially if he's come back as a 12/12. Most of Polukranos' points came in Standard where it was successful in aggro decks, but it was far more successful in Sultai control decks that could quickly load the graveyard. These decks also often used Vorinclex Monstrous Raider, a creature which doubles counters when you put them on one of your permanents, and that means Polukranos would be a 12/12 when cast normally, and a 24/24 when it escapes. It's seen some sporadic play in other Pioneer graveyard decks, but it doesn't have any top 8 since 2024. At number 4, it's Kraul Harpooner. For 1 generic and a green, is a 3/2 with reach, and when he enters, you choose up to 1 target creature you don't control with flying, and the Harpooner gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is a number of creature cards in your graveyard, and then the Harpooner fights that creature. He's a lot smaller than most of the other fighters on this list, and that means his hope of surviving is a lot lower. It needs to be a flyer with 1 or less power, but when he can do that, he feels amazing, and he's also a super cheap card that can basically kill any flyer when he needs to. And he's not too shabby as just a generic 2-drop either. While it's seen significant main deck play, it's been featured even more in the sideboard, where it can be brought in against decks reliant on flyers, especially when those flyers are small enough for the Harpooner to give you a true 2-for-1. Some of the most notable creatures it's killed over the years, without dying itself, include Gilded Goose, Supreme Phantom, and Ledger Shredder before it gets a chance to grow. It's still seeing play in Pioneer and Modern from time to time, and if the right flyers are around in a particular format, it's always got a shot at seeing some play. I just told you about Kraul Harpooner, a creature with reach, so let me tell you about a big milestone I'm trying to reach: 100,000 subscribers. I'm getting closer to my goal every day and would really appreciate your help. At number 3, it's Voracious Hydra. For X and 2 green, it's a 0/1 with trample, and it enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. When it enters, you also get to choose between 2 options. You can double the number of the counters on the Hydra, and if you choose that, obviously you're getting a very efficient big trampler, or you can have it fight a creature you don't control. Those 2 modes are pretty sweet, since if you're already ahead, you may just want a big trampler to close out the game, but if your opponent has something you have to remove, Voracious Hydra can do that job pretty well too. While in Standard, it was played in mono-green aggro decks, which loved having a creature that they could just curve out with that also could be a good removal spell. It's seen significant play in Pioneer too, where like Kogla, it's an enabler for devotion nonsense and a payoff for it. However, Voracious Hydra doesn't have any top 8 so far in 2025. At number 2, it's Tolsimir, Friend to Wolves. For 2 generic, 2 green, and a white, it's a 3/3 that makes a 3/3 legendary Voja Wolf token when it enters, and whenever a wolf enters, you gain 3 life, and that creature fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So even on his own, you spend 5 mana for 2 3/3s, 3 life, and a removal spell. Sure, the fight effect can be a bit more narrow than most removal, but Voja usually has something it can kill. This whole package makes Tolsimir a great way to stabilize, as getting multiple bodies, gaining life, and killing something is going to make life a lot harder on your opponent. In Standard, it was played in Bant midrange and control decks, as well as in the aforementioned Winota decks alongside Tovolar's Huntmaster, giving that deck 2 cards that were great at fighting with wolves. It's also been regularly featured in Pioneer over the years, most frequently in Niv Mizzet Reborn decks. These decks are all about multicolored stuff between Niv Mizzet and Bring to Light, and both cards can hit a singleton Tolsimir when you really need one. It even has 1 top 8 in a modern Niv Mizzet deck. More recently, it's been played in Pioneer Enigmatic Incarnation decks, which use their enchantments to tutor up creatures, and a singleton Tolsimir is in many versions of that deck. It's going to continue to rack up top 8s, but so is the card in front of it, which is Wicked Wolf. That's right, another wolf. Before making this top 10, I would not have told you that there are lots of wolves and werewolves who love to fight, but it turns out there are several of them that have had a big impact on competitive Magic. Wicked Wolf chief among them. For 2 generic and 2 green, it's a 3/3 that fights something when it enters, and you can also sacrifice food to put a +1/+1 counter on Wicked Wolf and give it indestructible until end of turn, and then you tap it. One of the problems with fights is that if all of your opponent's creatures are bigger than yours, they aren't really worth using, but Wicked Wolf's ability to gobble up food and become indestructible means that in the decks that it's played in, it can kill just about anything. On top of that, it's also a nightmare in combat, since it can easily grow and become indestructible in those situations too. One thing to keep in mind about this card, and I bring it up because it's a common mistake, you can use this ability even if the wolf is already tapped, because it's part of the effect and not part of the cost, and that's why it works in combat too. Unsurprisingly, Wicked Wolf has been played in food decks in multiple formats over the years, often as one of the best cards in the deck, and it's been especially dominant in Standard and Pioneer. It was at its absolute most wicked in those two formats in Jund's Sacrifice decks. These decks seek to take advantage of sacrificing things with payoffs like Mayhem Devil, and the ability of the wolf to sacrifice food without any mana cost can result in huge amounts of damage on top of all the other impressive value you're already getting out of it. Wicked Wolf is going to continue to put up top 8s, especially in Pioneer, so it's going to solidify its position on this list going forward. So, those are Magic's top 10 fighting creatures. If you like it when your creatures are good brawlers, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to check out over 900 other MTG top 10s, including many more that look at mechanics and keywords, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.